So that was rather disappointing again, because I think we definitely had the speed for a better outcome than that. So, can't go backwards. We're here today, and hopefully both cars can qualify better than they did down there.
It's a two-car team for Schmidt-Peterson Motorsports, James Jakes and James Hinchcliffe for owner Sam Schmidt.
Well, I'm back talking IndyCars then. They have just taken the green flag, and everybody's rolling back out to the race course. Well, a few are remaining in the pits, Bajno and Montoya among them. But they will have a very, very short time here. They got started just a little bit late, and so the officials are trying to add that onto the end of it. Remember, though, we also had, almost 23 and a half minutes of red flag as well. As they spraying the big thing seemed to be getting off into the gravel pit, spraying the gravel back on the track, cars getting dug in when they get off. All those things will now come under everybody's consideration.
Kanaan continues to set the pace. A good weekend so far for Chip Ganassi's operation, as both TK and Scott Dixon are at the top of the time scoring pylon. Bourdais is third quick. Pagano and Newgarden in your top five. Then Will Power, Charlie Kimball, Carlos Huertas is eighth quick. Sage Caro ninth quick, and Juan Montoya is 10th quick.
So this will give them a chance maybe to get up to speed, maybe get another lap, perhaps even two, before they actually drop the checkered flag ending this very first session. And I have to say, a very successful session, all things considered. Normally, coming to a new circuit is a very complex thing. We've said that before. And in some cases, when they're actually coming, this isn't. This is a permanent road course. But when they're actually coming to a street course for the first time, it becomes that much more complicated. So they're going to continue on with yet another lap as most of the cars that rolled out of the pits cross the start-finish line for the very first time. We'll see what they come up with. Again, Tony Kanaan is the mark they're looking for, a 1:19.1. And we'll see then later today, once they go back and talk this thing over and decide what changes they can make. It's pretty difficult to make a lot of the changes while you're in a practice session in the pits, but you get now to pull all the data off the cars, look at the computers, look at the different traces, and decide what it is that you may try next to make the car faster.
And got a lot of time to mull that over, Paul, between now and that next session. As we said, this one getting ready to wrap up, and they won't take the green again until 4:15 Central this afternoon. So that's a lot of time to debrief and maybe take a look at some changes you might make and throw a couple of things at the car to see if you can't pick up some of that precious time that you value. We saw it last 2 weeks ago in the opener at St. Pete, as we see the number 5 machine having some issues on the course, local in turn number 6. That's James Hinchcliffe. That is a red flag situation. We'll see if that checkers the session as a whole. It may very well. But, Paul, the margin of error is going to grow slimmer and slimmer and slimmer, I think, as the season progresses when it comes to qualifying.
Well, right now they're only showing the red flag at the start-finish line, not the checker yet. So we're now looking at a 1:45 for the end of the session.
Okay.
So that's a little different than the information we had up on the board earlier. So that's good. That gives them a lot more time.
One of the things, guys, that fans here in the stands listening to us might notice, this is an extremely accessible paddock of drivers as they get out of their cars at the end of the practice session, but don't necessarily be the judge of that after this first session. You may think to yourself, wait a minute, I wanted to go down and get an autograph, get a picture, maybe get a chance to see your favorite driver. They're going to be in a bit of a hurry after this first session, because here's what happens each and every weekend in the Verizon Indycar Series after that first practice session. The drivers actually go to a weigh-in where their weight is recorded for the course of the weekend. Then you take the heaviest weight of the driver. That becomes the barometer in which every car must weigh the same amount with the driver factored in for the actual race. So if you are, of course, underweight, less than the driver who weighs the heaviest, you have weight jackers that go throughout the course of the weekend on race day itself that you can distribute in different places in your car. This is for the fair and equal balance of everybody having the exact same weight. But that weigh-in takes place immediately following this session. Of course, a lot of the drivers will want to get there, get done, then get a chance to debrief. So it's one of the second races, if you will, that happens. The first one trying to get the best practice time, and the second one trying to get there to weigh in quickly.
To further your point, Jake, if you don't have an in-car camera, in your car on the top of it, where that puck is that you see above the air intake, above the driver's head, you have to put a weight inside there that's equal to the weight of that in-car camera. If not, it's a penalty.
Yeah, that was a rule a long time coming. In the day when they were not mandated to onboard cameras, it was considered a liability to carry one because it did carry small, though. It's only about 4 pounds additional weight, but it's also very, very high being up there on the top, and that affects the roll center of the car. And then the solution was, well, let's just put a camera mount on every car, and if it doesn't have a camera, we'll put a weight in it. And that became the rule, and I think it's helped immensely because now the TV people can make pretty quick changes on putting cameras on different cars as the story changes throughout the weekend. By the way, we owe an apology if we got anybody's heart rate up. We were looking, both Mark and I, at Saturday's schedule rather than today's. They're actually going to go to 1:45 our time here. And so they got plenty of time yet to figure this whole thing out, though right now we are under the red flag, and it's because of Hinchcliffe. Hinchcliffe's on his way back into the pits now. So once again, we hope to go green fairly quickly here.
You see the crew continuing to work on the 41 of Jack Hawksworth on pit road. He's turned only 9 laps in this session, and I think you got to give a tip of the hat to the driver of that 41 machine, Paul. He had some issues early on in the race. He got out of pit sequence, and he led a handful of laps, and late in the race it was obvious that he was going to have to make another stop, but the crew performed beautifully on his last stop, and he was able to get himself back inside the top 10. I think it was a very good day for the driver of the 41 machine, Jack Hawksworth.
I just noticed a Ferris wheel. Now, the Ferris wheel wasn't at St. Pete this year.
Right.
So they brought it here? Is that what we're saying?
Andretti Sports Marketing.
And there are people enjoying it. You heard earlier that it's not just a race site, it's an event site. Green flag comes out, and again the cars head back to the track. That's the way they make this whole thing actually to be viable to work a circuit like this, not only as a race course, but everything else, Nick.
That is right. That Ferris wheel, got to be honest with you, it's clipping along quite a bit. I think I might be a little too scared to jump on that thing, but it is pretty cool. That would be one heck of a view if you get to the top of that thing, because you'd have a great view of the front straightaway and all the cars here on pit lane. Made my way down to the Schmidt-Peterson pit of James Hinchcliffe for that most recent red flag. He was the cause of it. What I've noticed, anytime these cars are brought back down to pit lane, Paul, immediately people go to the crew members go to that front wing and they start trying to bounce that thing around and check the stability. Of course, as you guys talked about earlier in the session, these teams, Chevrolet and Honda, has mandated some structural changes to strengthen those front wings. But boy, all the attention for these teams, anytime we see a local spin, just a brief spin like Hinchcliffe had, it's to look at that front wing. And the good news for that number 5 car is that everything looks okay. Both the rear and front wing, everything's stable. They'll put on a new set of tires and hopefully get Hinch back out on the racetrack here as we continue on with practice.
That seems like a pretty good idea, especially considering that IndyCar did mandate some changes, some ways to stiffen those different elements for this weekend so they weren't as prone to breaking off the car. So you see your car come in, you have a chance to touch it and wiggle some of those things around, make sure they're still intact. Probably a pretty good idea, especially since all the teams are doing that.
Canan, Dixon, Bourdais, Pagenaud, and Newgarden in your top 5. Fast time so far, a 1:19.1 for Tony Canan. That's held up for quite a while now. As we mentioned, his teammate Scott Dixon right there with him. Then Bourdais, Pagenaud, and Newgarden in your top 5. Will Power's up to 6th now. Charlie Kimball went off course a few moments ago, and that number 83 machine has put his car through some pretty good paces so far to 1:19.6. Carlos Huertas, 8th quick for Dale Coyne, and the rookie Sage Karam is 9th quick. Montoya completes the top 10. Then Munoz, Castro Neves, Hunter Ray, Rahal, Coletti, Hinchcliffe, Chavez, Felipe. Then James Jakes and Marco Andretti your top 20, rounding them out. Takuma Sato at a 1:21.41, we should say. Francisco Draconi in the number 19 car is 22nd quick. Then Simona is 23rd quick, and Jack Hawksworth 24th quick. The driver that's turned the lion's share of the laps, 20 for Newgarden, 19 for Karam. Everyone else in the mid-teens, and as we mentioned with the issues of the 41 machine that Jack Hawksworth has had, Jack has had an opportunity to turn only 9 circuits here at NOLA.
That 1 minute, 19 second bracket expends all the way down to the 15th place as everybody figures it out more and more. They get faster and faster. Mark, I'm enjoying watching turn 1 here. It's a long run past the pits, considerably long run after the pits, and then it moves into a right-hander. It's fairly open, fairly sweeping, but it is paved well off of the outside of the corner, the left-hand side of the course. And everybody seems to decide that's a really good place to run, to the point that they're taking almost all 4 wheels over the red and white marked session and then making what is actually a fairly abrupt little maneuver to get them back and set for the next corner.
You're going to have to be patient if when we get under race conditions. If you're in a drag race, the guy to the bottom side is going to have to be awfully careful, Paul, because the way that turn is constructed, that momentum, if they're not careful, is going to carry them out to the car that's running through there on the high side. I would think in preparation for that turn, certainly the high side is where you're going to want to be. And I know it's a competitive situation, but my thought process is unless you have all the trust in the world of the driver that you're running side by side with, you're going to be, your head's going to be on a swivel going into that.
To force the cars to come a little more left, narrow the approach into that corner. If you are aware of the layout of this circuit as well, they made a change on the backstretch. There used to be a little bit of a chicane there. They decided the Indy cars can handle that just fine, and so they've got a pretty straight run. And yep, we have one more car off, and this time it is Scott Dixon.
The number 9 machine. That is, when is the last time? And I saw this on Indy.
That's why I hesitated.
I've seen it posted on Twitter in preparation once the liveries were revealed. I don't know. I wonder when the last time was that Chip Ganassi came to an IndyCar race without a car carrying that red and white Target sponsorship.
Well, actually, there's 2 things at play there. One, he's not in the red and white Target car. And 2, the fact that it's blue and white. Right. And 3, that it's Scott off course at all. I mean, those combine to make you look and say, I wonder who that really is.
His number of DNFs to starts is unlike anything that you will see throughout most of open wheel racing history.
And what happened to him in that very area that we were talking about, he was coming on the exit of that first turn, went wide, but then the back end got away from him, and that brought him back over to the right and actually off course onto the grass on the right-hand side of the course as they approached down toward the second corner. So that got Scott Dixon. A lot of people are working pretty hard trying that area, and for some of them it's not working as expected, but at least they know where the edge is now.
Maybe Dixon will take over the role that his former teammate Dario Franchitti once had, and I think TK did a bit last year. We believed that for a 2-year, maybe a 3-year period with the rotating associate sponsorships that Chip had in place, Dario amassed somewhere in the neighborhood of 5,000 different driver suits in 3 years. I'm sure Dario needed help finding his race car on a race weekend the first time he went to it, because it seemed like the livery was changing each and every week on Dario's car. So maybe Dixon will live that life a little bit this year with the folks at Ganassi Race.
Speaking of changing liveries, Mark, that's the case for Marco Andretti. For folks that are looking out or will be watching the race come Sunday, and of course in doing so would encourage them to listen to the audio, of course, from the IndyCar radio, from the IMS radio network. But Marco Andretti's car now blue with white trim. It is a Mutual of Omaha and Merchant First paint scheme on it. Of course, we are familiar with his Snapple yellow and blue paint scheme, and that's the one that's officially listed on the actual guide here for the course of the weekend. But they went with Merchant First and Mutual of Omaha. Snapple still involved, of course. It's still the primary for Marco Andretti, but this is not a weekend where we will see the familiar blue and yellow, predominantly yellow car for Marco Andretti. So as you're looking for that car number 27 of the third generation driver, the grandson of the 1969 Indianapolis 500 winner Mario Andretti, you will be looking for a predominantly blue and white car with that Snapple logo on top, Merchant First on the side.
And speaking of Mario, still one of the great champions, is still out there, as great champions do. He comes to every race. He is in with the fans. He has plenty of opportunity to talk about IndyCar and tout how well it is working right now, and it's great to see Mario when he does that, in fact. One of the other things, there's a little technological aspect to what allows them now to do things like changed the sponsors so quickly. It used to be these cars, you had to paint them.
Yeah.
And then they went to the wraps, the vinyl wraps, and now because of those, you can change things pretty quickly. So
Indeed.
I can sell you a sponsor in the morning, and you can have that car pretty well set by the middle of the afternoon.
Yeah, that's changed a lot about the face of sponsorship and sponsorship activation in all forms of motorsports.
We just got a pretty good look at Montoya as he came onto the pit straight, and that was a pretty rough going for him. I mean, he was bouncing way off the line and then kind of gathered it up and is now working on over to the backside of the course. And Mark, you and I have both seen a number of cars kind of undulating, if that's the word, going into that first turn, like there's a little ripple or something there.
I'm from Monrovia, Paul. We call that bouncing up and down.
Bouncing,
yeah. We're just bouncing. But, yeah, we saw Ryan Hunter-Reay. We saw his car, the DHL machine, under slow motion, a replay. And I'm not sure that in one of those series that all four of his wheels were on the ground at the same time. I mean, that's how pronounced it was at speed, and that does have a bit of an impact, Paul. When tires leave the ground, that affects the downforce of the grip just a little bit.
Also, it's very difficult to steer when you're in the air.
Well, but it's funny though. You know, we had the issue at Baltimore a couple of years ago. You know, where guys were getting over the switchbacks, and you could actually see them with the tires off the ground, the overhead shots of the in-car camera. They're still driving the car even though the wheels are off the ground. So, yeah, instincts take over there.
And, they're really good when they anticipate that bump and change the steering direction while they're in the air.
That's right.
Then you're dealing with a top-flight driver, and, of course, all these guys know how to do that. Guys and gals, since this weekend, of course, we've got Di Silvestro back in the ranks, which is a good thing as well. Nothing changes. Tony Kanaan is still quick, followed by Dixon, Bourdais, Pagenaud, and Power. Top 5, then Newgarden, Kimball, Huertas, Sage Karam, and Montoya rounds out the top 10. Munoz is now down 11th, followed by Castro Neves, Ryan Hunter-Reay, Graham Rahal, and the rookie Coletti. So that's where they are at the moment, and boy, I just saw a couple of cars once again. This turn one's getting kind of interesting for me because we've seen a couple of them. Well, I saw it just a moment ago, two of them running together, and they both took a very high line, though slightly different as they were coming off the corner. It made for an exciting view. I'm sure the fans enjoy it. So we're running down to what should be the last few minutes of this session, last 9 or so. IndyCar officials wanting to give all the time they can. The schedule of the session was to go to 45 after, despite what we alluded to earlier. But they've also indicated that they are going to try and match up on the end of the session what they lost going into the session because they were a few minutes late on the start. Another big off on the race course, so much so that the 26 car, and of course that's Munoz, actually crossed over a grassed area to an entirely different road to bring him down onto the pit road. But no harm, no foul. He's on the way to the pits, probably pull a little grass out from the underside, and he'll be right back at it.
And again, the next session is scheduled for 4:10 this afternoon. That's Central Time, 5:10 Eastern, and or 4:15, we should say. 4:15. It'll run till 5:35. So again, IndyCar practice at 4:15 Central, 5:15 Eastern. So quite a layoff, if you will, as we mentioned earlier, Paul. That's a lot of time to debrief before they have to be back out there.
Kind of looks like Felipe had one of those situations as well. A run off, gets on the road and goes right back onto the course, and now once again the 19 car, that's Dracone, is sitting stopped out on the race course. Whenever you look at that car or any of the rookies this year, you look at them from behind and you will see 2 yellow horizontal stripes. Dracone, by the way, is under power and just mashed the throttle, spun it a little bit, and has gotten right back in line. You'll see these horizontal bright yellow stripes, and that tells everybody else that you are behind a rookie, so you make whatever adjustment you think is necessary, depending on who it is, if it's necessary.
Early on, Paul, it appears as though the Chevys have unloaded quick. We go through the top 7 before we find a Honda. Huertas, the quickest Honda right now. He's running in the 8th position, Honda in the 11th position, then the 13th and the 14th. So it looks like Chevy, their dominance was pretty evident early on at St. Petersburg, and it looks like the bow ties unloaded in a good way here with Kanaan, Dixon, Bourdais, Pagenaud, Power, Newgarden and Kimball right now atop Huertas, the fastest Honda, at 1:19.67.
Extending it out, Mike, to 4 decimal points. The quick time held by Tony Kanaan is a 1:19.1797. The scoring allows us to take a look at it in that way. And then second quick Dixon is at 1:19.2200. So those are the top numbers that you're looking at. And, of course, we've seen them come down throughout this practice session. Once they get everything dialed in and they go out for the second session, assuming the weather conditions don't change drastically, and we're hoping they're not. We don't have a strong indication that they will. They will no doubt lower that time a little bit further.
We talked about Kanaan and the momentum that he carries into this event and into this season from a year ago. With that third at St. Pete, he's been on the podium in 6 of his last 8 races. 6 of his last 8, he's been on the podium. And by the way, his crew had a pretty good day as well, Paul. The crew of the NTT Data entry won the Firestone Pit Stop Performance Award during the Grand Prix at St. Petersburg. Their total pit lane time was just a little over 99 seconds, and so they'll get a check for $10,000 in pre-race ceremony.
That's not bad.
That's a just reward. And I think, again, that's indicative of the fact that motorsports is a team sport, and you will always hear a driver thank his crew for all of their efforts. So a good weekend for Tony Kanaan to St. Petersburg, and it appears as though he is carrying that momentum into NOLA this weekend.
And a good point made there, by the way, with under 5 minutes now left to go in this session. That comes from the officials. We talk so much about the driver, and of course, he's the focus. He's the one in the car. He's the one that's taking risks. But without question, this is such a team sport. Sometimes we forget that. We try not to, because the people that work on these cars, you might call them mechanics. They're far more than anything like that. And the engineering people and the tacticians that figure this whole thing out. I mean, that's a coordinated effort. That's why it is a team, and it takes all of those different elements to actually create success out of this thing.
We've always tried to, here at IndyCar Radio, point out those drivers. We do and those team members, try to identify them by name whenever possible. And folks, I tell you, if you want to know what it's like to be in those shoes, the next time you pull over on a major interstate during rush hour with car trouble, if it's a flat tire, jump out there and get that thing changed and get back in the car in about 7 seconds with that traffic flying by you. No problem. Give you a little taste about what it is that they go through. But again, let's face it. In many instances, Paul, those pit stop responsibilities are just a small part of the responsibilities that they carry with this race team.
And there's something that we don't see, and television never sees to pick it up. The fans in the stands can see it, and that is as they get ready for their pit stops. You can see the tension. Everybody is up on the wall. They have their assignment. They know that 7 seconds is it. You don't want to go any longer than that, or you're really putting your driver in jeopardy, because he's earned all that time on the track. And then the car arrives. They pounce on it. So many things happen simultaneously. 7 seconds or less later, and they're gone. And then after the car is well down the pits, the team, they pat each other on the back. Everybody around them gives them a nice round of applause because they've just done something pretty significant. It's nice to see that reaction.
Well, those of you that have some history with stick and ball sports, if you've been on teams, think about being in the locker room before you take the floor. All the energy associated with that, all the pregame, the speech and the hoopla and whatnot, and then that adrenaline rush that comes. These guys get to do that 5 or 6 times a race.
And just like sports as you're talking, everybody has a move.
Right.
Everybody has a place they have to be. Your move depends on my move. And everybody has to be one guy pulling away while the other is stepping in. I mean, it's we used to call it a ballet, and I guess it really still is.
Oh, sure it is.
So Kanaan, Dixon, Bourdais, Coletti, Pagano, and Power. Those are your top 6 here. We're counting down in the final minutes of this, the very first practice session, at what has turned out to be a wonderful facility. You heard earlier in our interview right off the top the good sense of humor, almost to the point of mirth, and that's what you seem to see about the people in New Orleans. Mm-hmm. They really enjoy themselves. Are they a little bit different in their approach? Yeah, they are. I mean,
they love their city and the region.
Absolutely. They're so proud of this area, and they still talk about some of the troubles that they have had. Hurricane, the oil spill, all of those affected the city, but it did not affect the spirit.
Let's give a tip of the cap to Stefano Coletti. For a moment there, that lap must have been taken away because of a violation. Coletti was up to fourth quick, and then all of a sudden,
I'm sorry, a task has failed.
On the grids.
And as we mentioned, we've been tracking a lot of little violations that are pulling laps away from them, and I think probably a good part of those are, one, the drivers put final minutes watching for a checkered flag, which should come almost any time now, and Will Power, of course, who made that valiant try to catch his teammate Juan Montoya 2 weeks ago in St. Petersburg.
He's figuring it out.
Just moved up to the second place. And looking at him on the track, smooth, looks like he has really figured the proper setup out, mechanical, if not both mechanical and aero, because that last lap, he just went out there and just dusted down into the 118s. He is at a 118.9. Kanan dropped to a 118.8. And Scott Dixon bounced in there as third quick with a 118.96 as well. So right at the last part of the session, the gauntlet goes down.
Checkers is out. We have one timing and scoring monitor, Paul, in our booth that shows that Chevy had for a while, Chevy had the top 9. Now Hinchcliffe spoils that party. Hinchcliffe slots in at 8th. Now we see Chavez in the 9th position.
Another Honda.
Chevy continues to own the top 7 spots now that the checkers have flown on this session. Kanan holds on to the top spot. Will Power with a good run late grabs P2. Then Scott Dixon and Sebastian Bourdais, TK, already out of his car and sitting on the pit box. We see Elio out of his car as well, all smiles as he often is. Pagano is in the top 5. Newgarden, Karam, and Hinchcliffe. Gabby Chavez with a nice run later. That 98 machine for Brian Herta. Montoya 10th quick. Then Kimball, Munoz, Huertas. Elio is 14th quick. Ryan Hunter-Ray. Then Rahal, Coletti, Andretti, Jakes, Filippi, Simona Di Silvestro, Takuma, Sato 22nd. Jack Hawksworth, 23rd quick. He only got 18 laps in with the issues that they had at the start of the session. And Francisco Draconi turned 26 laps in the session, the rookie.
Enough to step over and talk with our guys. So in a few moments, we'll have Nick and Jake both and get a little bit more of a wrap-up from the driver's point of view of this circuit. In the meantime, there is a reminder at 4:15 this afternoon. We will be back on the air. That is the Verizon Indycar Series, and that lasts until 5:35, 1 hour and 20 minutes for the Verizon Indycars, and then on the air tomorrow, Saturday, 12:30 to 1:15, and then at 4:15 on Saturday, it is time for qualifying. And going down through the Fast Six and that whole shootout format, that has provided some fascinating times, both already once this year and a number of times last season, especially when you find a guy who got eliminated in one of the earlier sessions, but did a quick time that ended up being the fastest time and faster in the pole, but since he didn't make it out of his group, sorry.
The late, great Jim McKay's Wide World of Sports intro has an application across so many forms of sports, the thrill of victory and the agony of defeat, and that is exactly what you see on full display anytime we go Firestone Fast Six qualifying. That knockout format, it has led to so much aggravation and frustration for these drivers. I mean, remember how animated Graham was, after qualifying at St. Petersburg. So one of the guys, Jake Query, that might be somewhat satisfied is standing on pit road. Scott Dixon came home third quick in the session, Jake. His quick time, 1:18.97.
It is unusual to see a blue and white car piloted by Scott Dixon. The Brita water filtration, which of course makes water cleaner. You made these laps pretty clean, though. You had a couple of clean laps out there. Let's talk about this track, Scott. What are the challenges for it, and which track or circuit that fans might be familiar with does it most remind you of?
No, it's obviously good to be in a new market, and everybody here at NOLA Motorsports Park have done a fantastic job, and the transformation they had to do, and add a lot of grandstands and track work, and it's been fantastic, obviously, over the past few months to see that go through the changes, and huge credit to them. And for us, obviously, we want to come here and put on a great show, for all the IndyCar fans and possibly new fans out there. And as you mentioned, this weekend sporting a blue Target car, obviously with, Brita being the marquee sponsor on the car. And hopefully we won't be dealing with too much water out there over on the weekend.
Let me ask you, I asked Graham Rahal this. When we come to a new track, Scott, how long does it take for you as a driver to familiarize yourself and become instinctive with the pattern necessary to drive?
It doesn't take too long. I think you the big stuff, you get straight away. Obviously, you do a track walk and you figure out where everything goes to start with. And then it's just basically, working on the car and trying to get it better. And then you improve on, small sectors or areas that you're losing on. So, the first 10 laps, I think you gather most of the information, and then it's just fine-tuning from there.
It's a little bit warm. I'll let you go get some water out of that Brita water filtration pitcher.
Yeah, thanks, man. Appreciate it.
All right, Scott Dixon, who is off to a good start here this weekend. Let's go down to Nick Yeoman.
All right, after the first practice session, our winner from a week ago, Juan Montoya, out of the car. Juan, your impressions after that first session for that 2-car?
Well, their Verizon Chevy's been pretty good. I mean, we had a really good, first race. Here, we're trying different things. We're kind of struggling right now with the car. A little bit of balance issues. I think it's everybody just the hotter conditions changed and just trying to figure out what's the best condition for qualifying because there's a good chance of rain later, so we'll see.
Final thing, let me ask you about those Firestone tires. Obviously, with these new downforce levels, you got to push them a lot harder. How did they hold up in at St. Petersburg, where you were able to capture the win?
Hey, it was okay. I always struggle with red tires in street course, and I still did, but managed them well, and I think that was one of the key things.
All right, that's Juan Montoya done with this first practice session here at NOLA Motorsports Park.
And the winner of the St. Petersburg race just 2 weeks ago. So we've seen the first session. Mark, your reaction?
Well, Tony Kanaan continues momentum. We talked about the number of podium finishes that TK has had. Will Power is right there. He shows no signs of slowing down off his championship run. And the usual suspects at the top. And I said it at St. Petersburg, and at some point, and maybe I should stop.